Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another hour of Healthy Conclusions, where we try to give our listeners important information on nutrition, exercise, and holistic, alternative, and integrative medicine. Please take a minute to visit our website at www.healthyconclusions.com and like us on Facebook. My name is Bob Neugebauer, and I will be your host for this evening's show. Tonight's show is being brought to you by Altrua HealthShare, which has been serving its members and their families with their health care needs since 1997. Please take a moment to visit their website at altruahealthshare.org or call 888-244-3839 to see just what Altrua can offer your family for their health care needs. It could mean substantial savings. Our guest for this evening is Sharon Hammer. Sharon is a registered yoga teacher and received a Master's of Mental Health Counseling at Idaho State University and will soon be registered as a licensed professional counselor. These are just a few of her accomplishments, as she holds a BA in Business Administration, a law degree from Southern Illinois University, along with a Master's in Public Administration. She is also trained as a structural wildland firefighter and EMT, which we know a lot about here in Idaho. Wow, is there anything missing?
Well, I like to climb mountains, and sometimes I sing at church.
Wow, well, you're a jack of all trades, master of none. Before we start, I wanted to tell our audience that I attended one of your classes and have to say that I was a bit surprised to the extent of which yoga is physically challenging. When I got home, I could feel a few aches and pains from using muscles that I normally don't use when exercising at the gym. I would also recommend that if anyone is curious about yoga for its mind and body benefits, that they give Sharon Hammer's yoga a try. It will be very invigorating. Let's start with a few interesting questions. I guess it would be appropriate to start off by asking you, with all of those degrees that you have accomplished, what drove you to become a yoga instructor?
Well, I've actually practiced the physical aspect of yoga most of my life. I had two older sisters in the 1970s that were more of the hippie generation and introduced me to yoga. But more recently, I had an event that changed the course of my life. And as a result, I have chosen professions, mental health counseling as well as yoga, to help other people that have experienced traumatic events in their life.
Well, when you say traumatic events, I mean, we all experience traumatic events in different ways, whether it be the death of a close person or whether it be a traffic accident or loss of a job. How does yoga help deal with something like that?
As we enter a yoga practice, we work towards integrating the body, the mind, and the spirit. And it helps us get to the place of where we can actually sort of take a step back and be more of an observer to what is going on, try to make meaning out of life and out of the situation. That's been my experience.
Rather than being involved, totally immersed in the situation.
Rather than being consumed by and ending up with a lot of judgment or shaming yourself.
I got it. Can you tell us a little about the practice of yoga and why it has become so popular as not only an exercise but a lifestyle? And what would be the range of practices of yoga?
Actually, I like, Bob, that you used the word lifestyle because it is a lifestyle, a life practice. It integrates physical, emotional, and mental aspects of health. And it's become popular, I think, because it is so accessible to anyone, really, of any age or physical condition or mental health. And it's also very cost-effective. I mean, you can get yoga practices, free ones over the Internet. And it has become westernized and popularized by the media and celebrities in our culture, which has made it more acceptable, I think.
I noticed when I went to your class yesterday that you practiced a different type of yoga than I was used to with the videos. And, you know, yoga with the videos was pretty much all about positioning. And where your class was a lot different because it was all about movement. And that, to me, was a little bit challenging, but also very exhilarating in other ways. Why is it that you practice that And is that different than what we see in the videos all the time?
Well, when we talk about the range of yoga practices, there can be everything from what one of my teachers refers to as bendy Lululemon clad millennials to practices that are much more restorative in nature. So you can go from hot yoga is a very popular type of yoga right now that they practice in studios over 100 degrees, and it is very sort of regimented with the different alignments and the postures that you go into. The full range of then going into what one of the classes that I teach is a restorative yoga practice. And that practice is all floor-based, it's all supported postures, and it's more of a meditative practice to allow the body the opportunity to access the rest and digest system, the parasympathetic nervous system in the body.
I understand a fair amount about the parasympathetic nervous system, but I also understand that I'm a guy who has osteoarthritis. And the one thing that did come out of your class yesterday is my neck. I've been having a chiropractor work on it for some time. It actually felt like I moved a few muscles in there that I hadn't moved before and had a little bit more range of motion. Is that something that yoga works on and does for you?
That's a very typical sort of feedback that I get from my students. In my classes, and having a class with a yoga teacher is like having a conversation with someone, because that yoga teacher will bring their personal experiences, their history, their what they have learned into the yoga class. Because of my mental health counseling background and my experience through life, when I come into the yoga class, I like to integrate the movement of the body within the framework of the breath and focusing the mind. And when we do that, we can allow the muscles to begin to relax, lengthen, and stretch. We can use the breath as the really powerful, energetic, cleansing energy that it is.
Well, having been through one of your classes, there are a lot of elderly people in your classes, and a lot of them who practice yoga. Is it safe even for those with weakened bones, and can yoga actually play a part in strengthening your bone structure and help in warding off diseases like osteoporosis?
Yes, absolutely. It is. Yoga can be safe for anyone. The issue is that you need to get into the right class. So if you had someone that had osteoporosis, I would not suggest to them a class that was one of the hot yoga classes that was more of the athletic cardio classes. But like the class that you attended yesterday was a gentle class, and that is meant to lengthen and strengthen the muscles as well as stimulate bone growth. When we hold some of the postures that we go into, there's a physiological aspect that happens. The muscles begin to build strength, then they begin to build endurance, and then at some point as you're holding the postures, and it would depend on the individual, then it begins to stimulate bone growth.
So you can actually stimulate bone growth by doing the yoga exercises, and how often do you have to practice this to do something like that? Is it once, twice, 3 times a week? Or?
It would depend on the practice and on the person and how their physical condition. And people ask me that all the time. Well, how many times a week should I practice yoga? Well, it depends on the type of yoga that you're practicing. The type of practice that we did yesterday, the gentle yoga, that would be safe to do almost every day. But a really athletic, challenging yoga class, I would not recommend that type of practice every day. But you will see benefits, like you had mentioned, just with the movement, the range of motion that you had in your neck. You may find the benefits from that after the very first class.
I understand that yoga started some 5,000 years ago in India and has been found to be effective in improving immune functions, sleep, lowering stress levels, and lowering the risk of hypertension and heart disease. How long would you say that one would have to practice to attain some of these benefits?
Well, you could as early as the first class.
Really?
Yes. For example, in my classes when I teach, I will integrate the developing self-compassion, compassion, gratitude, forgiveness. I will work that into the physical practice of the class, and as a result, accessing that parasympathetic nervous system and allowing the body to enter into that rest and digest healing mode. And that could happen as soon as the first class, in every class that you take. But you also have to be present to do the work. If you just show up and you're still thinking about work or family or finances or relationships outside of the classroom, you're not going to get the benefit that you get if you actually focus on the work when you're in the room.
Well, I was just focusing on how did I get in that position and how am I going to get out of it. That's usually what I focus on. We're going to have to take a quick break here. We'll be right back with you. This is Bob Neugebauer. We're speaking with Sharon Hammer, and we're sponsored by Altrua Health Share here at 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Health Conclusions on 580 KIDO. We're speaking with Sharon Hammer, sponsored by AltruaHealthShare.org. So, Sharon, we were talking about the different diseases that could potentially be affected by using yoga. Have you found that to be true with some of the people that you have in your classes? Have they come and told you that they are feeling better, their blood pressure is lowered, or they have less of stress level than they had before?
Yes, definitely. I've had students come to me and tell me, shared with me part of what their ailments are, different types of cancer, diabetes, generalized anxiety is prevalent in our society, depression. And many of my students will report that coming to the yoga classes is an important part of their practice, their health practice. There are evidence-based studies that exist that show the potential for yoga to be a successful intervention. And there are more of those studies coming out all the time. So yoga is a part of, the word you used before was lifestyle. It's part of that lifestyle with a healthy diet and exercise and stress reduction and moderate alcohol consumption, things of that nature that affect our health overall.
Well, something I've been promoting with some of our legislators in Washington have been to help the people who are on this Medicaid carousel that they can never get off of. And I think one of the answers to the questions of how do we get them off of that is to get some result-oriented type medicine or exercise or physical therapy of some sort, rather than just feeding them pills, which is what we've been doing for years. That just seems to be the easiest way to handle the problem, and the fact that we don't have physicians who have a lot of time to spend with these patients. Would you think that, and I personally believe that this would, something like yoga classes, which are very easy to run and rather inexpensive when you talk about a program to help people deal with stress or deal with weight or deal with other problems. Maybe something like this might be part of an integrative program to help people in these Medicaid programs.
It is a part of many integrative health programs. I know, for example, I have a nephew who is a physician at the VA hospital in Miami, and they, and many of the veterans hospitals use an integrative, as an integrative approach, a yoga therapy that is a meditation practice to help with stress reduction with the veterans.
And you work with the veterans down here in Boise, right?
I have done some work with the Veterans Hospital here in Boise, yes.
And that's mostly with PTSD?
Yes. And then a couple of weeks ago, I worked with one of my teachers in the community, Jeannie Dillian, and we did a yellow ribbon cutting event for the Air National Guard for returning soldiers with a meditative yoga practice. iRest. It's a particular type of meditative practice.
Yeah, it's funny. I seem to see and read more about the veterans being more attuned to the integrative programs than the other areas that we have medical problems with. But I'm hoping to see more of that come about. Our biggest problem, one of the biggest problems in our nation today, especially in the U.S., is obesity. And in fact, 10% or 7 to 10% of the people in the world are considered to be obese, which is becoming a really big problem. Can yoga aid people in losing weight and getting back to some normalcy?
There actually are evidence-based studies that support that conclusion, that yoga is effective, or is a potentially successful intervention, that's the correct terminology, for using yoga as weight maintenance, preventing obesity, and maintaining a healthy weight. And part of that is the movement of the body. One of my teachers, Leslie Kaminoff, who is known for his yoga anatomy and his book on yoga anatomy, says we want a little bit of movement in a lot of places in our yoga practice. I quote him just about every day in my class. And that increases circulation. It helps to lengthen the muscles, strengthen the muscles. It helps with the digestive process. When we access the parasympathetic nervous system, we allow the body the opportunity to bring the digestive fluids back into the abdominal area, the blood back into the abdominal area, which helps in the digestive assimilation and elimination process of the body, which is really core to having a good healthy body.
Well, we all know that exercise relieves stress in many people. It also releases endorphins, which give you a good feeling also. But in yoga, does it work the same way, or does it kind of work in a different way? I mean, you don't have exercise to your fullest to be all sweaty and hot and tired. I noticed in class yesterday, I wasn't tired.
Right.
I was sore, but I wasn't tired.
Yeah.
Now, is that something that basically everybody can do, regardless of how obese they are? If they want to lose weight, this is an easy way to do it?
I wouldn't say easy. It's probably not easy, but it is a way to. When people experience traumatic events in their life, or if someone becomes obese, there is a tendency to want to shut down and not be connected with the body and not feel the body. So part of what we do in yoga is get reconnected with the body, reconnected with the breath. The breath is so undervalued for the cleansing, healing energy, powerful energy that it is, and the ability to focus the mind. So when we do that, when we allow that, when we practice that puts us in. One of my favorite authors, his name's Jack Kornfield. He said, when in our yoga practice, when we work to bring the body and the breath into sequence and focus the mind, we put ourselves in the optimal position for mental clarity, emotional stability, and creative capacity. And that has been my experience with yoga over the past 40 plus years.
Well, you talk about breathing exercises, and I'm quite familiar with those in terms of being used to lower blood pressure, but normally people have to start out at a much younger age, not particularly my age, 72, but somewhere back in their 20s or 30s, to get their breathing sequences to be much deeper and much different than the short breaths that we're normally used to taking on a regular basis. Can you actually train somebody, say at my age, to change their breathing patterns, and that would work towards lowering that blood pressure? Because I've seen it happen with me.
Absolutely. So the diaphragm is a muscle that is primarily involved in the breathing process. So it's a muscle. So as you inhale, the diaphragm is moving down. As you exhale, it's moving back up. So the more that you practice that, just like, lifting weights, strengthening your biceps, you're going to strengthen that diaphragmatic muscle that's going to increase your breathing capacity. And the breath can be used it can be used as an energizing breath, as a calming breath, or as a neutralizing breath. So it's not just one thing. It can be used for all those different types of things. And I teach breath practices, different breath practices in my class, so that you become familiar with that breath.
When you talk about breath exercises, I have to think back at some of the studies that I've read on these, and the fact that we have so many people who are taking blood pressure medication and they only have to do a simple breathing exercise to actually lower their blood pressure. Why do they decide to take the pill?
I don't have an answer for that.
I mean, wouldn't it be much easier just to come to a yoga class and exercise for a little bit?
Well,
Maybe
I think
once?
the world would be a better place if everybody did yoga, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I think it'd be a better place if everybody just exercised. That would help us all together.
And, just to clarify, because we talk a lot
Sure.
about yoga as an exercise, and that to me makes me think of physical.
Right.
But it is, like you said, lifestyle, emotional, physical, mental, energetically. It's all of that.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to have to take a quick break. We'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Healthy Conclusions, brought to you by Altrua Health Share with your host, Bob Neugebauer. And we're talking with Sharon Hammer on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Health Conclusions on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. We're speaking with Sharon Hammer, and this show is sponsored by Altrua Health Share. So we finished talking about how yoga can affect your blood pressure and your heart rate. I found that to be true. And again, we were talking about how people prefer to take pills from the doctor and pay for those rather than pay for a yoga class. And I just don't understand that. I can't fathom that. But then again, I guess that's the way a lot of people want to go, the easy way. Would you consider yoga a therapy? And if so, what real ailments have you found it to be helpful for its use?
So yoga, the most of the way that we practice it in the Western culture is in groups, like the class that you went to yesterday. Yoga therapy specifically is a discipline that is developing within actually the medical field as part integrating into the medical field. Being a yoga teacher is different than being a yoga therapist. A yoga therapist has, it's a whole different program. It can be between 2 and 4 years. And the yoga therapy is designed for a one-on-one with the person, with the yoga therapist, for the particular type of ailment that might be affecting that person. And there are evidence-based studies that show that yoga therapy can be a successful for different types of like musculoskeletal problems, digestive problems, respiratory ailments, weight management, hypertension, osteoporosis.
So there's a whole field of things that yoga therapy would be good for. Are there a lot of yoga therapists around, or is this just so new that there are only a few that actually do this work?
It's not that new, but it's becoming more organized. There is the International Association of Yoga Therapists, which I belong to, but I am not a certified yoga therapist yet. There are only a few in Idaho. The only one that I know of specifically is Jeannie Dillian, one of my yoga teachers. She has a studio on Park Center Boulevard, Yoga for Wellness, and she is a senior staff member at the Shanti Yoga Teacher Training Program. So the yoga teachers in the community that go through that program have her expertise to learn from.
So she's teaching the teachers.
She is teaching the teachers.
Okay.
I teach as well at the school. I teach a segment of teaching yoga from a trauma-informed perspective. There's quite a lot of work that's been done primarily by two gentlemen, David Emerson and Bessel van der Kolk, who have studied the effects of using yoga as a treatment for complex trauma and PTSD. And Bessel van der Kolk has a book that was published a year or two ago called The Body Keeps the Score, about how we store our experiences in our body, and how through yoga that we can learn to release that. They have a great website. It's called the Trauma Center at Justice Resort Institute. It's in Brookline, Massachusetts, that has a lot of resources available for people.
Do you see yoga becoming more important in the integrative therapies of people with trauma and anxiety and stress problems? that seem to be the order of the day in terms of illnesses that most of the people who have autoimmune diseases or other diseases, is this going to be one of the future ways of coping with these problems rather than the prescription drug arena, which we're trying to get away from? Because that seems to be the more costly route that we're taking.
That is my hope, and that is part of my professional agenda. I am, as a mental health counselor, I use mental health counseling in my yoga classes. I use yoga techniques in my counseling sessions. There is a movement within the International Association of Yoga Therapists to integrate yoga into mental health counseling. And there are a number of seminars that I've seen provided recently on integrating counseling into the yoga classes.
Well, a lot of people are talking about how yoga is beneficial for your brain. And I guess somebody was talking about hatha yoga. What is hatha yoga, and how does that affect your brain function, speed, accuracy, mental processing, etc.?
So I think it's pronounced hatha, and it is a particular type of yoga. I will admit I'm not that familiar with that particular type of yoga. There are many different types of yoga. For example, vinyasa flow is a type of yoga, hatha yoga, restorative yoga, Iyengar yoga, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, all these different types of yoga, but they all work towards integrating a focus of the mind. And part of the way that we do that is, for example, a Vini yoga, V-I-N-I, different than vinyasa flow, is a practice, a very old practice of yoga, of integrating the breath with the movement of the body. And as you're doing that, you really have to focus the mind. So it helps develop the skill of focusing the mind.
So do you intend to combine your new degree now and your practice with yoga in trying to help people with disorders like PTSD or ADHD, schizophrenia, these types of diseases and problems that are basically mental in category? Is that something you're going to be getting into? As
a counselor and as a yoga teacher, I would see anyone that was affected by those disorders. It's not a cure-all, be-all for everything, and it doesn't discount the benefit of more, different types of approaches, but it does have value for just about anyone that is living, really. I mean, learning to breathe, learning how to calm the mind and integrate the use of the body.
So you consider it part of an integrative process of bringing somebody back to a healthy state?
A very integral and important part, yes.
Do you know of any body in the valley right now that's using yoga for this integrative medical purpose?
Well, Jeannie Dillion, she is the yoga therapist. So there's a couple more in the area. I just don't know them personally. I know her personally, so I can speak to what she provides for her clients. But anybody that participates in a yoga that is suitable for them is increasing the likelihood that they will receive the benefits of that practice. And I clarify that because you don't want to get somebody that perhaps has osteoporosis into a hot flow class. One of the things that, for example, just a couple of weeks ago, in conjunction with Jeannie Dillion, I taught a chair yoga class at St. Alphonsus for people that have MS, and that brings the yoga practice to people who perhaps have very limited mobility.
So, and I'm going to ask this question kind of with tongue in cheek. Would this be something that they might want to use in wellness programs, say at our prisons?
Oh, there is yoga that is in many of the prisons in our country. Not only in this, I'm not sure specifically about the Valley here, but I hear about many yoga programs that are in the prisons.
So they are beneficial and they are being used in a lot of places.
That's my understanding.
Oh, I like that idea. I think that's a much better idea than what we're doing with the chain gangs and picking up garbage on the sides of the roads.
Me too.
How can yoga have a positive effect on your digestive tract? I mean, it's about 70% of our immune system, and it's important in controlling disease. But how does it go about affecting how your digestive tract works and become better and more adaptable to helping with your immune system?
So in a couple of different ways. So there's about 35 feet of plumbing in the average digestive tract. That's a lot of area for places to get stuck. In a physical practice of yoga, part of what we do, some of the poses or forms that we go into might be, for example, a twist or a rotation. That's going to help sort of stimulate the digestive process. Some of the poses that we go to put pressure on the, like sort of the right side of the abdominal area. That's the area of the ascending colon. That stimulates the digestive process. But not just sort of the movement practice, accessing the parasympathetic nervous system. Feels like that's my mantra today, the parasympathetic nervous system. Allows the body to bring the digestive fluids and the blood back into the abdominal area, and that will promote digestion, assimilation, and elimination. And also working with the posture. We spend a lot of time in the position that's referred to as flexion with the spine, which is bent over, more of what you might think of like a forward fold, which is one of the ways that the spine is meant to move, which is great, but we spend a lot of time in that position. And when we do that, we sort of compress the abdominal area. And as we do yoga and we learn to lengthen through the spine and give the abdominal area and the organs all of the place to, the room to go back into their place, it helps with that process of digestion.
So would this be something that would help with something like diverticulitis, where you have something caught in your intestine, would this help release whatever the problem is? Or would it be helpful in releasing toxins that we ingest into our bodies?
I haven't seen anything specifically on diverticulitis. I wouldn't be surprised, but I haven't seen any evidence-based studies that would support that it is helpful for that. I have, however, seen studies that support that it is helpful for the digestive process in general. And that also, as we allow the body to access the parasympathetic nervous system, that is when the body is able to process out the stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, which we need to function. We want them to function, but they're hard on the body and they can wear the body down. And because of our culture and our society, we tend to stay in the sympathetic nervous system, which is when those hormones are produced. And by allowing the body to enter the rest and digest system, that's when we can process out those toxins.
Question, just one quick one here. Parasympathetic nervous system. I've read several books about it, one by Dr. Gonzalez. And could you just explain what it is quickly to the audience so they know what it is?
So there's the autonomic nervous system in the body is comprised of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And just on a real basic level, the sympathetic is our freeze, fight, or flight mode. So if we are in a situation where we need to run faster or be stronger to be able to survive, the body will produce certain hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. The parasympathetic nervous system is the rest, what they refer to as the rest and digest mode, which allows the body then to recover from that stimulation of the parasympathetic nerve or the sympathetic nervous system.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have to take a quick break here again. You've been listening to Sharon Hammer and Bob Neugebauer at Healthy Conclusions, brought to you by Altrua Health Share on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Healthy Conclusions at 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. We're speaking with Sharon Hammer, a yoga instructor right here in the Valley, and this is sponsored by AltruaHealthShare.org. Okay, so we talked about the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system. I think everybody probably has a handle on that now. Let's get into a few other things. Do you know of anyone who is using yoga to help people who have autoimmune diseases like MS or Hashimoto's or lupus?
My teacher, Jeannie Dillion, works with a population of people that would have many of those conditions. Last week or two, I taught a class at St. Al's at the hospital for people specifically that have MS, for people that have limited mobility. At the studio where I teach in Meridian Body Calm, we're actually starting a chair yoga class next month. And that would be for people, it could be for anybody, but it would be particularly for people that have challenges balancing or very limited mobility.
Do you do this down at St. Al's on a regular basis? This part of something that you do to give back to the community, or is this something they actually pay you for? I'm just kind of curious to see whether they're moving in a direction of using alternative methods of helping people, or whether you're doing this gratis and they're just accepting it.
Well, what I taught a couple weeks ago was for a particular weekend event that they were having that was for people with MS, and it was a segment in a program that they had over the weekend.
How do you find that the yoga helps the people with MS? In what ways? I happen to have a very good friend who has it. And
MS?
Yes, and she's taking a medication that costs $7,000 a month, and doesn't seem to be helping an awful lot.
So getting to know your body, knowing what it feels like to be in your body, I don't know that much about MS, but the little bit I know is that they can experience flare-ups. So getting to know what it is that might trigger a flare-up for a person, learning to focus on different parts of their bodies, getting the movement of the breath within the framework of the body, and also focusing the mind.
So this isn't something that you would have in a regular yoga class, or would you have somebody like this in a regular yoga class, or would you have a special class for them?
It could be any of those things. Right now, I know that I have a couple of students that come to regular classes that are in a place in their lives where they can come to group classes at the studio. I also have private clients that are not comfortable going to a group class, and so I can teach one-on-one, which is really more like what yoga was developed as, is that one-on-one yoga practice. They may have a physical condition. They may just be uncomfortable coming into a class. And that way I can work with them one-on-one to get them comfortable, maybe familiar with what we would do in a class setting.
So you could do this in a class like I took yesterday?
I'm sorry?
You could do this in a class that I took yesterday? You could have somebody with MS in that class?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
all right.
It probably
I was just kind of curious.
Yeah.
As you get more involved in yoga, it's been said that you have a more heightened awareness of your body. And some people actually say that this could lead to some sort of a hypochondriac state. Have you ever realized that with any of your students, or even with yourself?
That has not been my experience, and I'm not aware of that with students. Part of the yoga is making that connection with your body, your breath, and your mind, which is information. And I do use an analogy in my classes of driving a car without the radio on. So if the radio's on, you can't really hear how the engine's running. You can't hear if something's going wrong. But if you turn the radio off, maybe if you roll the windows down, you can hear how the engine's running. You can hear the tires on the road. So that's the way I like to sort of, be able to explain it. If there were an issue that came up that was more of an obsession of the body, that to me would bring up a counseling issue that you would want to explore what is the cause of that obsession with the body.
Well, that's interesting. I like your analogy about the car. I was in your class yesterday, as I've told everyone, and I found out that my balance wasn't quite so good as I thought it would be. And maybe that's because I didn't have shoes on, I'm not sure. And balance is important to us as we get older, because falling is the most dangerous thing that can happen to us. Breaking bones can be devastating because they don't heal very quickly. Would you consider this a good reason for the elderly to take up yoga?
Well, I would consider it a good reason for everyone to do yoga because balance is a really important part of how we function in this world. The statistics on people that fall, you may know this, like 30% of the population over 65 fall. Once you have a fall, then you're at higher risk for having a fall. And balance is a skill, and it's also affected by emotional, physical, mental conditions. And as you practice it, you will develop that skill. I try to integrate a little bit of balance practice into all of my classes. And like I say, a little bit of movement in a lot of places during the class. I also like to encourage my students to do a little bit of yoga throughout the entire day. I refer to what I call the microwave yoga. Like when you're waiting on your coffee to heat up in front of the microwave, like you can do a little yoga, right? You can stand on one leg, move around a little bit.
How would you rate yoga as an exercise for strengthening muscles and increasing flexibility compared to something like high-intensity training?
Well, I would rate it as excellent because that is, lengthening the muscles, strengthening the muscles, stimulating bone growth are a few of the benefits of yoga. But also, we just talked about balance. So yoga can be a cardio exercise, but like the class that you took yesterday, that wasn't a cardio class. So balance, you need to get balance. You need to, if you're taking gentle classes of yoga, you might want to integrate some high intensity exercise, maybe swimming or hiking or golfing or something else, that might bring up the respiratory system.
Well, I would like to thank Sharon Hammer for joining us this evening and for offering her insights into yoga and how it can benefit you. This is Bob Neugebauer signing off for Healthy Conclusions, and we hope you will join us again at the same time next Sunday for another hour of informative talk on nutrition, exercise, and alternative medicine options. Sponsored by AltruaHealthShare.org on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM.